Hey everyone, Phobos coming at you with another build guide, and this time it's for a Freezing Pulse Self-Cast Berserker, and it's a life-based build that uses Mind Over Matter, and in this case the mana that we're going to be using for that is essentially Energy Shield, as we reserve all of our mana, or most of it, as you can see here, and I'll get into why we do that in a little bit, but first off we can start with the links, I guess. That would be the easiest thing. And the chest. So for the links, we have Control Destruction, Freezing Pulse, Spell Echo, Cold Penetration, Faster Casting, and Increased Critical Strikes. Now, in a 5 link, you want to drop the Cold Penetration. Um, it's technically more DPS than the Increased Critical Strikes, but the Increased Critical Strikes is going to allow you to freeze things. So more often essentially, because this build isn't assassin, so we don't have access to tons of crits, so the increased critical strike gem is pretty important, despite the fact that Freeze Pulse has a pretty good base critical strike, but it's nothing insane or anything like that. So I have like 78 critical strike buffed when I have all my charges, so even with the voids and stuff, we don't have like close to crit cap, so yeah, that's pretty much why you want to use critical strikes there on the 5 link. And once you get the 6, you upgrade it to the cold penetration. Now, in terms of the actual chest itself, so why are we using the Covenant? Well, it's mostly because I wanted to make this build Marauder, and I kind of wanted to do it a little bit budget. And I know it doesn't look too budget with the 6 link and the voids, but trust me, you do not need void batteries to make this build work. They obviously make you do a lot more damage, but you can clear maps pretty easily. I'd say like lower maps, and you can farm strands easily with normal wands and a 5 link, as long as you don't roll them to something like absolutely insane, or you don't like put like a ton of crazy sextons on them or something like that. So it's definitely possible to farm up currency on this build in lower level maps and stuff like that before you have your final form going. But like I said, so the idea was to kind of do something a little bit budget, and I wanted to do it I wanted to do it Berserker, and I've done Berserker CI before, but that was for Whispering Ice, and the idea there is that you convert a ton of the int, or a ton of the strength into int, and that's really good because for Whispering Ice, int is like amazing because it gives damage, duration on the Ice Storm, and then the typical ES and mana benefits. In this case, I wasn't so sure because even if I come out of Marauder and I convert the int, I'm basically just gaining ES and some mana. So I wasn't entirely sure if I wanted to do it CI. I'm probably going to try and do a CI version of this at some point, and it will probably be better. The reason why I'm so fixated on going Berserker is basically just because of Pain Reaver. Now, I know you can use Warlord's Mark. I personally don't really like using Warlord's Mark that much, especially with the Blasphemy changes, but it's really just the fact that against curse immune targets and stuff like that, it just doesn't work. And then it has reduced effectiveness on bosses. And then on top of that, with the Freezing Pulse build, you have such great off-screen potential, and in some cases you're gonna want to off-screen mobs a little bit, and you're not gonna have a blasphemy on them if they're being off-screen. So I just really like the Marauder for this build, and you can definitely build it CI. I just wanted to try it like this. So because I don't really like the hybrid setup, like another thing you can do is if you want, you can just keep your ES on your life and you can go Ghost Reaver. But I don't really like that because you have to like leech to one area, and then if you get hit by chaos damage, it's kind of annoying to replenish your life. If it's like consistent chaos damage, if it's just a little hit, it's fine. But if you're in like a Chayula breach or something, it's pretty bad. So I don't really like going that option, especially given this build doesn't have a lot of chaos res, and you pretty much you need the Berserker Ascendancy, so you need Pain Reaver and Aspect of Carnage, so you can't really go something like Occultist or something like that. So in order to avoid the hybrid problem, I basically just use this chest, which gives our Freezing Pulse blood magic, and the key thing is that it gives just the blood magic node and not the gem, because if it was the gem, the mana cost would be absurdly high, and it would be kind of sketchy casting it. I mean, we have Vol Pact, but if you like missed or something, you could kind of chunk yourself out quite a lot, and you can't really do that with this version because it just has the blood magic gem itself. And then the added Chaos Gem is pretty much just like an extra bonus, right? It's not really something we're doing the build for, but it's never bad to have a little bit of bonus Chaos damage. And I just remembered I need to quality this chest. I just bought it. But anyways, so yeah, that's the point of using the chest, just to get the blood magic on the skill. And the idea is there that we then need our ES on our mana, because if I have my ES on my life and I'm using blood magic, then my ES will never regen. So that's the problem that we encounter, and we solve it by moving it over to mana, by taking the Mind Over Matter node and Eldritch Battery. And then we are allowed to reserve all of our mana, which is nice. Originally I was running Anger with 2 Heralds, but you're probably going to want to run Purity of Ice. I would say that if you don't have damage, like if you're really struggling on damage, then feel free to run the Anger. But once you get high damage, you really want Purity of Ice, because you're going to be taking a lot of damage from Reflect. And you have to be pretty careful with that, especially using this Sapphire Flask here in conjunction with your Purity. So that's pretty much why we use the chest. And I'll move on to some of the other gear choices. So the Voids are just like BIS damage item. There's nothing much to say there. You can do the build with anything else you want, but the Voids are just going to give you the most damage. If you want to do like Shield Charge, you could do Scepter Shield. You could do Dagger Shield, but Voids are just going to give you the most damage for sure. Rings, just life rings. These probably should be opal rings, but like I said, the character's kind of low level and stuff, and I've been collecting gear as we go, so I haven't had an opal ring. This ring is particularly nice. I actually found this. This one was like 10 chaos or something, so nothing too expensive there. Cow reward. Now, I actually have a bunch of different options for neck, and this is like one of the slots I wanted to talk about, so I'm using this for now because I don't have the projectile speed enchant on the helmet. And the reason why I don't have that is because I've been buying them and crafting them and pretty much making pretty good ES helms out of them. So I don't want to reroll over them, so I'm selling them, and eventually I'll hit the hybrid one that I need. But right now I've just been getting ES helm. So I'm currently using a helm with no enchant for the build. Once I get the 30% projectile speed, I'll be able to drop this. I mean, I could drop it now, but I really liked having the prod speed, because it just makes it so long, that extra prod speed. And when I remove this, I will probably be using, I think it's the Pandemonious it's called. I have it in my stash. I'll show you right here. It's, yeah, this right here. Now, this is kind of insane because it gives you sort of another layer of defense, and the enemies are blinded when they're chilled. And then you do 20% more damage against chilled enemies, which is pretty much going to be everything in the game, barring you don't take that status ailment map mod, and barring you're not doing like Guardians, so, or Aziri or something like that. So like the really, really difficult bosses in the end game, I believe, can't be chilled, so you wouldn't use this neck on those fights. But for everything else in general mapping, this is just like a really strong neck. Plus it has a 10 of cold resist, which is really nice because we use the Wise Oak as a flask. And since we want our cold as our highest uncapped res, in order to get the damage penetration, just having this in conjunction with Purity of Ice makes it really easy to always have higher cold res. So yeah, I really like this amulet, but right now I'm just using the carry ward because of the projectile speed. Another good thing about both of these amulets is that they have a 30 dex base, which you'll need because of cold penetration. If you don't have cold penetration in the link, you don't need quite as much dex. You only need like, I think this is like 95 at level 19, and then yeah, 98. So you can kind of get away with like 10 less dex. So that can change the game in some cases. Just something to keep in mind. Another option you can do for next, by the way, is I have a +1 curse carry ward. Now, this is obviously really good, but for general mapping, it's not really that important because I have so much damage that I kind of just destroy everything. And I basically, if I take off this neck, because I lose the implicit dexterity, I'll have to put another point into dex. So it's definitely worth it to do that to gain extra curse when you need it. But for what I'm doing right now, I don't need it. So that's why I don't have this neck equipped. And how I do the dual curse is you can either do it on like an Orb of Storms or something, or like I think right now I have Well, I have a slot that we could put a curse in to self-cast. This is just currently a Freezing Pulse gem. I don't have the curse in there because I don't need it. I have an Enfeeble right here, and then I have a Frostbite as well in my bank. But you would put like a Frostbite in there, and then you have a Power Charge, or you have a, what do you call it here? An Assassin's Mark Curse on Hit setup with Herald of Thunder. And against bosses where you're going to be able to transition right from the map to the boss, you can easily get the two curses. If it's going to be like a Guardian type boss, then you need to rearrange your links a bit to get something probably like an Orb of Storms, cast Curse on Hit with the two curses linked there, and then you drop the Orb of Storms on the Guardian, and it puts both curses on, whatever curses you want. So you can mess around with some things, but right now I'm just kind of doing general mapping, so I'm not really going to all those lengths, and the Assassin's Mark is really fine. Speaking of the Assassin's Mark, we should probably talk about that next, because I think that's pretty much all I wanted to say about the amulet. And actually, I'll go to the rest of the gear. So we use the Winds of Change, and you don't have to use these, but it's just like extra projectile speed that we're mostly using them for, and they give life as well, and it's a life build. So if they didn't have the life, I probably wouldn't use them, but since they have a decent amount of life, and prod speed and prod damage, I figured not. And then like I said, we want the projectile speed chant on the helm. Nothing really fancy on the belt. You'd probably, ideally, if you had good res in all the areas, you'd want strength in this belt. But right now it's just try res for me. That's pretty much the gear explained. Oh, and then the weapon swaps. This is important. You want a Storm Prison, and you want a Brine Rot Flag. And why you want these things is because you basically only need the Storm Prison if you have Voids, right? Because the idea is when you have Voids, you have 9 power charges. And when you weapon swap, you only have 7 power charges normally. So you get this Storm Prison, and it allows you to have 8. Because what you're doing here is you want this flag shield so that you're in a map and you're clearing, but for some reason you lose your charges, let's say. It's kind of hard to lose your charges, but it can happen like if you're doing like a core map, for example, and you clear out the both halves and you're running back to Malachi. That's a very easy opportunity to lose charges. So what you would do in that case is you would just weapon swap, right, to the shield, and you would cast Rallying Cry. And since the shield gives you, where is it here? The shield gives you +2 power charges on using a Warcry. You automatically refresh your stack. Now you don't go to max charges, you only go to 8, and that's why we have the Storm Prism. But then you can easily just drop an Orb of Storms or something on the boss, and you're back up to 9 charges. So this is a really effective way of sustaining your charges in a pinch. Or even like if you feel like you might need to cast Orb of Storms or something, but it's not quite safe and you just want to freeze pulse from a distance, just weapon swap, hit your Warcry, you're back to decent amount of charges, you only like 1 minus the max, and then just keep spamming freeze pulse away. So this is a really good shield, really good for totem builds as well. Pretty much just anything that is going to use power charges and may find yourself in a pinch. I guess if you're using like Skyforth, it becomes pretty redundant at that point, but Skyforth is pretty GG, so we can kind of avoid talking about that, I guess. And now I guess we can go into the other links. So I wanted to start with the Assassin's Mark setup. This is kind of how we're primarily getting charges. Typically what will happen is you'll go into a map, you'll drop Orb of Storms, and you'll go to like max charges, and then your Assassin's Mark will sustain you. You can go into a map and do the weapon swap and just spam your Warcry, but it's kind of like probably like 10-15 seconds that are just wasted because it's pretty easy to just generate max charges in a pack and then sustain them with the Assassin's Mark. So yeah, we just run the Assassin's Mark with the Curse on Hit and the Herald of Thunder, and we have more than enough lightning damage to shock. So you're pretty much always putting Assassin's Mark on things, and it's just really easy to get charges that way. You pretty much never have to use Orb of Storms, but Orb of Storms is always there if you need it, and you have the Brine Rot Shield. So you have like so many contingency plans onto how to get your power charges if there's like ever a situation where one of the methods doesn't work. That's what I like about having all these things, so that you never really drop your charges. If you drop your charges, it's pretty much completely on you with this build. So in the Winds of Change, we just have a Immortal Call, duration, cast on damage taken setup with a Lightning Trap. Lightning Trap is just really useful for bosses. Like if you have low damage, so if you have a 5 link and 2 wands, Lightning Trap is going to be a much bigger part of you freezing bosses, right? Because I have so much damage, like I can pretty much freeze bosses by just walking up to them in most cases. But Vol Lightning Trap basically lets you push the limit on what you can freeze. So as you could see, as you'll see when I demo the Strand, I think it is. And this character is obviously far from perfect in terms of damage optimization because I still need to finish like some quality gems and get better rings and stuff like that, and then get that neck. But I'll drop the lightning trap on the Strand boss, and the Strand boss has like 50% increased monster life and equilibrium. So basically, they're getting a ton of cold res when I hit them with freeze pulse, and we can still freeze them. So yeah, the lightning trap definitely a good addition. I have flame dash here with faster casting and blood magic. Don't really need that on blood magic. I should probably actually take that off. But I think that was just like a remnant of when I was swapping things around. And then we have our Orb of Storms set up here. Now, the reason why we don't have our Orb of Storms set up somewhere else is because you need your curse on hit setup to not be in a wand, right? Because you could like normally I'd like to give the Orb of Storms the 4 link and just add something else on there like increased AoE. But what I do is I just make this into a 4 link and throw the lightning golem in there because you don't want your assassin's mark or any of your auras basically, so the auras that are in here on a weapon, because when you swap you'll lose the auras, so that would be way too much of a pain in the ass. So that's why you need the auras on your boots and your helm, because this is obviously taken up since this is going to give us our reds that we need for the cast when damage taken. Um, yeah, and then we just throw a frost bomb in there. I'm just leveling with a freeze pulse right now. And a purity of ice, obviously. Like I said, you don't really need the purity if your damage is kind of lacking. And then the weapon swap, we just have freezing pulses that we're leveling, and then you would throw like a duration in here. I don't have one right now. I think I thought I bought one and I forgot. So that's pretty much the gear breakdown. As far as the damage goes, so the damage is really low in town, but it's like 240k when you're clearing through a map with all your charges. Now that's including the first snow jewels, which is what allow us to get our GMP. And those are also a critical part of the build, but they're only like 1 chaos, so not super important. Just make sure you place them in an area where you can activate the threshold, but that's really easy to do now because you don't need to actually invest any points into the actual areas to activate them. So you just have to be able to touch int, basically, and they activate. So really easy to activate. And yeah, pick up 2 of those for sure because the GMP is nice. And like I said, we're getting some of that extra damage from the jewels, so I would say it's probably around 220k or something, or 215k without that buff. But that's with using Cold Pen. So Cold Pen doesn't show up in the tooltip, and then that's not accounting for your Frost Bomb and your Wise Oak. So single target, this does massive damage. Yeah. And we can look at the Ascendancy, obviously pretty intuitive though. Hold on. Just basically getting Aspect of Carnage and then, well, Pain Reaver first and then Aspect of Carnage. Now, in terms of the Uber points, so you can either get Cloaked in Savagery or Rite of Ruin. Now, I'm actually really thinking of getting Rite of Ruin. Like, originally I was going to get Cloaked in Savagery for sure, but my Leech is already really good, and I'm planning on picking up Stun Immunity from the tree anyways by just coming down here. So I have it all the time for bossing and stuff like that. But it kind of depends what I want to do with this build, because if I'm not going to do Guardians, I don't think I'm actually going to take Unwavering Stance, because most other bosses are going to be frozen like permanently, so they're not really going to attack me, right? So the only time that I'm going to be really vulnerable to stuns in a map is when I'm essentially running through the map. And so having cannot be stunned if you killed recently is great, and then the 6% reduced damage taken if you killed recently is great against Reflect, and kind of works to help the 10% increase damage taken from Aspect of Carnage. So that's kind of like the thought process there of why I might take Rite of Ruin. I would say like taking this isn't wrong, but Reflect can really be an issue, and just having the 6% reduced damage taken all the time is nice, or pretty much all the time when you need it, because that's when the reflect comes into play. Um, and speaking of reflect, how to deal with reflect. So we have a couple things, right? We have the purity of ice, which I already mentioned, and then we have a sapphire flask, an alchemist sapphire flask. Now the suffix doesn't really matter, but I like alchemist because it gives us an extra uh, point of resist. I also think I'm going to be investing into these nodes right here, the alchemy nodes, because they're just so OP with every build. And this will give us, like, I believe, an extra 2 points in resist when you combine it, so it'll be like 3 total. So we'll essentially have like 9 to max cold from this flask. And that's really good when combined with our uh, purity of ice. As you can see, we'll go to, like, right now we're at 79. We pop the flask. Oops. Yeah, we're 86. So that'll actually go to 89, and that'll be really good against reflect. And then we'll also get extra damage on our wise oak and everything. So it's like you can't really go wrong with getting those flask nodes, and increases the duration. So it's pretty much just great all around. Um, So that's partially how we deal with reflect. And then the other thing is, because freezing pulse has a damage fall off, it's actually really good in a way because it lets you choose how you want to deal with reflect, right? So if you see a reflect monster, you basically just want to kind of create some space between you and the monster and then finish it off with freezing pulse. And the good thing is that you won't really have to worry about off-screen dying to reflect, because your freezing pulse won't be doing nearly enough damage to kill you off-screen. That's really nice because I've played like elemental bow builds and stuff before, and there's a bunch of ways to deal with reflect now, but like way back it was sort of sketchy, because you could kind of, it was like if you were using like split arrow and you had chain and you fired into like a reflect pack or something. I know they had reflect packs back then, but I mean, I know they don't have them now, but they had them back then, and you would basically just do a ton of damage to yourself, and you could never really know, because part of the strength of the build was that you could off-screen, but then that was also a risk. So it was kind of annoying, but with Freeze Pulse, you can off-screen and reduce your damage enough so that you're not going to just die to reflect looking off the screen. So that's really nice about this build. And that's how I pretty much deal with reflect. Like, you just don't want to stand like right on top of something and spam your Freeze Pulse. You can still probably survive it in most cases, especially once you get to your 6k life and you're at 2k mom. But it's just not recommended, right? Because you don't need to do it. So that's pretty much how we're going to deal with reflect. And yep. Oh, the Frost Bomb, the other thing, this is just obviously really nice because it's 20% minus cold res. So if you have the Frost Bomb, the Neck, and the Wise Oak Flask, you're penning like 60 cold res, and then you're penning like 37 from the gem. So this is insane. It's essentially like better than Inquiz, because the thing about Inquiz is that Inquiz doesn't get to use Frost Bomb because you can't bring the mob negative. They can't use Wise Oak. So you're basically getting that node from Inquiz with just Frostbomb and Wise Oak. Um, the nice thing is Inquisitor doesn't have to use Cold Pen, but when you don't have Inquisitor, the Cold Pen is not a detriment, obviously, it's helping you. So it's just some things to think about there. Of course, that's not the main reason we're not going Quiz. It's mostly obviously just for the leech. But yeah, figured I'd mention that. I'll give you one look at the tree. It's pretty straightforward. There's not really much you can change. I guess you can kind of decide if you want to get these nodes over here, but realistically, getting the jewel can be really good. I have a really nice jewel in here. So you're probably going to want to take the socket most of the time. And the melding cluster is good because you give it the ES for the Moam and the life. Um, Finishing out this build, there's a couple things you can do, right? Like I said, I'm probably not going to end up taking the stun immunity for just random mapping, so you can get Frost and Storm to give you more damage and help with Reflect. You can get the Alchemist Cluster, which I'm probably going to get, and then you can finish off with life over here, and there's life over here that's easily accessible. If you do want to take the stun immunity, you can go down and grab the life here, but yeah, I think I'm going to be holding off on that. I need to finish out my life wheel as well. But yep, so then I'm also going to get, you want to get Dex in a ring probably, because that will allow you to save this point. And that's just really nice. It's always nice when you can save a point. But yeah, so that's pretty much the build. If you have any questions or comments or concerns or anything like that, just let me know. You can put them in the comments or send me a PM on Reddit, and I'll try and get back to you as soon as possible. So yeah, look out for the demo of this, and I'll keep leveling it, and then I'll make an even better demo. And we may do like a recap on the guide at some point. So thanks for watching, and hope you enjoyed.